네, 잠시 안내 말씀드리겠습니다. 잠시 후 10시부터 2023 기후산업국제박람회 비즈니스 서밋의 ESG 경영 세션이 시작될 예정입니다. 참석자 여러분께서는 이제 장내로 입장하셔서 자리에 착석 부탁드리겠습니다. 네, 그리고 원활한 행사 진행을 위해서 소지하고 계신 휴대전화는 무음이나 전원을 꺼주시면 감사하겠습니다. Ladies and gentlemen, we will soon begin the ESG Management Session. We kindly ask you to please enter the hall and take your seats. And for the smooth operation of the event, we also kindly ask you to please turn off your mobile phones or turn them to silent mode. Thank you very much. We will soon begin. Thank you. 네, 다시 한번 안내 말씀드리겠습니다. 잠시 후 10시부터 2023 기후산업국제박람회 비즈니스 서밋의 ESG 경영 세션이 시작될 예정입니다. 참석자 여러분께서는 이제 입장하셔서 자리에 착석 부탁드리겠습니다. 네, 아울러 본행사는 한영 동시통역이 제공이 됩니다. 입장하시면서 동시통역 수신기를 이제 들고 들어오시고요. 한국어는 채널 1번, 영어는 채널 2번을 사용해 주시면 감사하겠습니다. Ladies and gentlemen, we will soon begin our ESG Management Session. For those of you who require interpretation services, please pick up a receiver on your way in. Please turn to channel 1 for Korean and channel 2 for English. Thank you very much. 네, 여러분 안녕하십니까? 2023
Good morning. Welcome to the Business Summit at the World Climate Industry Expo. I am Cho Ju-yeon. I will be leading you throughout the summit. I would like to take this opportunity to thank you for your participation despite your busy schedules. This session is being co-hosted by the Ministry of Trade, Industry and Energy and the Korean Energy Agency. It is an opportunity for us to take a look at the green business growth strategy of global climate industries and advanced companies from around the world. Yesterday, we had a low-carbon session from 3 to 5. It was late in the afternoon, but nevertheless, we did have a participation from many people around the world. And again, this is the first session of the day, and we still have a large audience. In order to boost the global competitiveness by strengthening ESG management, we will be talking about ESG management today at this session. Let us commence the ESG Management Session. We did have a grand start for our session. We have a very special session indeed. We have a special speech to start us off. We had a special speech by the New York Times Company International President, Stephen Dunbar-Johnson. Let's listen to his special speech to start off the session. Please invite him with a big round of applause.
Dunbar-Johnson, 네, 큰 박수로 모시겠습니다.
Good morning. I'm slightly embarrassed by that picture. It's fake news. It was taken about 20 years ago. It's a very great pleasure to be here and a great honor to be here in Busan. And I'm very grateful to the organizers of the World Climate Industry Expo for their kind hospitality. Especially so as South Korea is where the New York Times international Asia headquarters are. It is from here in South Korea that where as the sun rises in the east, we run our website and our breaking news operation, handing over to London later in the day and then on to New York before starting all over again. We chose South Korea first and foremost because of its strong record on protecting the freedom of the press, the cornerstone of a healthy and vibrant democracy. Press freedom in today's world is an increasingly rare and precious commodity that we cannot and must not take for granted. So being here in Busan and witnessing the remarkable depth and breadth of the businesses exhibiting downstairs at the Climate Industry Expo has reminded me of the additional reasons why we decided to base our Asia operations here in this country. The fantastic communications infrastructure, its ease of doing business, its top-class international schools, and its hyper-dynamic, rich cultural environment were also key factors. But again, those were all factors that were only considered because of this country's respect and understanding of the value of independent, without fear or favor journalism. So all to say, we are very grateful for the warmth with which we have been received, and I'm thrilled again to be here in Busan. So the focus of this very impressive gathering over the 3 days here is appropriately on the climate. It is, after all, the thing we all share and the thing we all depend on. As the executive of a news organization, the subject I would like to address this morning is the challenge of covering climate change and what really should be the most compelling and important story of this or any time. In Sharm el-Sheikh, during the COP climate talks last November, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres stated in his remarks to the assembled delegates, and I quote here, "We are on a highway to climate hell, with our foot still on the accelerator." Indeed, many of the stories on the front pages and home pages of news organizations reflect the narrative that Secretary General Guterres articulated. Dramatic and unprecedented flooding, widespread forest fires, collapsing glaciers, drought, and record-breaking heat waves are increasingly recurrent headlines. The science from reports such as the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC, have also given added credence to those warnings from the Secretary General. The reports suggest that the economic and human consequences of our current warming trajectory will result in a hellish future. These headlines have certainly raised awareness of the issues, and there is clear evidence that younger generations in particular are deeply concerned. However, and this is my point, while climate change is creeping up on the political agenda, headlines are of low appeal. For those of us, though, that are not reliant on throwing red meat to our audiences and who are driven by the mission to enhance society by getting to the truth, this is a complex challenge. A common assumption in journalism is that facts and figures are best suited to convey the urgency of the climate crisis. Yet the recent work of neuroscientists such as Chris de Meyer at King's College in London indicates that we respond more strongly to action-centric representations of the climate crisis than to any abstract and issue-centric ones. This suggests that not much is achieved by hitting people over the head. Indeed, there is a growing evidence that readers and audiences are switching off from the relentless barrage of negative news, and the climate crisis, given its enormity and existential nature, can make people feel powerless, helpless, and therefore even traumatized. Younger audiences in particular are affected by this. Putting your head in the sand may do absolutely nothing to help confront and solve the problem, but it can help alleviate stress. So how does or should the media walk the line between our responsibility to report the science, the facts, and the reality of unfolding events, but at the same time avoid turning off readers who are overwhelmed with the enormity of the challenge and consequently tune out? To make the challenge even starker, along with the bleak facts, the science is confronting us with a narrative is very often about the cost of the change that is required to avert a crisis. That for many, especially in the global north, it all still remains an abstract thing, something that's in the future. Perhaps, and this is very much my own personal musings, not enough of the narrative is about the cost of not taking action. There is ample economic evidence as to why taking action now makes significant economic sense, and businesses are certainly waking up to that. The notion of net zero by 2050, the mantra at all COP gatherings, has little meaning to people on the street. Perhaps we in the media can do a better job of translating what achieving net zero by 2050 would actually mean on a human level. What would our cities look like? What would they feel like if they were net zero by 2050? What would our transport systems look like? Our food and agricultural systems? our energy infrastructure. If we begin to paint that picture, we can start to see the real, tangible benefits of taking action now and working backwards from 2050. How this transition could create millions of new jobs, stimulate economies, improve health, and reduce geopolitical risk and potential conflict induced by the mass migration of millions of climate refugees. Wolfgang Blau, who was a visiting research fellow at the Reuters Institute for the Study of Journalism at Oxford University, where he studied the potential and the challenges of journalism in climate change, argues that a news organization's climate journalism should be as all-pervasive as the consequences of the climate crisis itself are. It should be completely normal, he argues, to have a paragraph on climate impacts in, let's say, a sports story about company earnings. In other words, you don't need to put climate in the headlines to tell good climate stories. A young lady I spent some time with recently, Clover Hogan, who is a 23-year-old climate activist and founder of an organization called Force of Nature, a youth non-profit that helped turn eco-anxiety into action, believes mainstream media need to be much more closely attuned to how young people consume media today. Tightly packaged stories that are relatable on a human level that speak to the emotions of young people. She stressed that media outlets should also be more prescriptive in terms of helping their readers and audiences understand what they, as individuals and as a collective, can do beyond going to the recycling center or eating less red meat. Another way of saying this is that journalism should also translate the issues of climate change beyond the science and the immediate climatic conditions to the here and the now. People tend to respond better to this than to abstract narratives. Emphasis on solutions is also needed, but journalism about potential solutions need more context. There is also the question of climate adaptation. The fact is, ladies and gentlemen, we already have reached tipping points in a number of areas, and this is a huge, interesting, multifaceted story in its own right. How are we going to buttress coastal cities from rising sea levels, develop drought and heat-resistant crops? Are our transport infrastructure and cities ready for higher temperatures? We are, in fact, looking at the biggest reconstruction story since the Second World War. And of course, there is the very important role the media has in holding businesses to account for their ESG commitments. What is real? What is greenwashing? What is a box-ticking exercise as opposed to meaningful change that is making meaningful impact? If we reduce climate journalism to simply reporting on breaking climatic news and crisis reporting, that, I think, would be a dereliction of duty. Taking stories down to the community and human levels makes them relatable, often compelling and empowering. Channel 4 News, which is a news organization in the United Kingdom, recently ran a story about the rewilding of two areas in the United Kingdom, one in Scotland and one in the northwest of the country, of England. This was, at its core, a climate story in that the rewilding of these large areas of land is leading to a much richer biodiversity, which in turn is leading into much more effective carbon sequestration. But rather than featuring that so much, the feature emphasized what this project is doing to the local communities, how jobs in the regions had grown by 75% as a direct result of the project, and that community welfare had been significantly enhanced. Or to say, they made it a human story, and a story that can inspire other regions to follow the same path. For a long time now, much of the narrative has been focused on the word stop. Stop polluting, stop consuming, stop fracking, stop drilling. Perhaps the operative word should be start. Start investing in clean energy infrastructure. Start creating new green jobs. Start reinvigorating communities. Start soil regeneration. Start rewilding. Start building healthy, sustainable equity and equitable supply chains. These are all great story subjects. They are all climate stories. Again, to be clear, we at the New York Times, whilst we fully recognize the enormity and existential nature of the climate challenge, we do not see ourselves or our role as advocates or activists. Whilst the fact of climate change being a man-made phenomenon has been settled, it is, how mankind addresses it is not settled. Our role is to question, to probe, to inform, to help readers connect the dots, understand the complexities from their own and form their own opinions. Whilst we established a dedicated climate team in the heart of our newsroom in 2017, we see it as a huge story that touches every desk. We have, as I say, a dedicated team that is over 20 journalists that are specifically focused on climate change. But that's really just the tip of the spear. Every desk is now covering climate. Business, technology, health, culture, all of the desks, sport, should be touching climate. Consequently, we believe there is no other international news organization than the New York Times that devotes more time, staff, or resources to producing deeply reported coverage to help readers understand climate change and to connect the dots. Our reporters take readers to communities where coastal populations are already fighting rising sea levels, to remote communities living in uninhabitable conditions as temperatures rise. They draw from a palette of visual tools and technology to help readers grasp complex, intangible climate science, from interactive visualizations to explain the world's most polluted cities, infrared cameras to help readers see the impact of invisible methane leaks, drone imaging to explain the fragility of ecosystems, and multimedia explorations to tell the story of how carbon mineralization could be harnessed to help fight climate change. And it's an effort that spans our 30-plus bureaus and newsrooms worldwide, as our reporting teams work together to explain the significance of climate change and translate the policies, politicking, and climate science for our growing global audience. In the past year, we have published more than 4,000 pieces of independent climate journalism. The Media and Climate Change Observatory, based in Colorado, has published its roundup of media coverage of our warming planet, and the New York Times is publishing more stories focused on climate change than any other newspaper, news organization in the United States and, I believe, in Europe. Last year, we published a wide-ranging special report on climate solutions. And just in yesterday's paper, we had another section on climate solutions, which explored what the term climate solution really means to industries, communities alike, from airlines and personal transportation to gender equality and conversation and the power of youth voices in climate activism. Climate solutions are constantly evolving, and we cover the topic in a myriad of ways, and we will continue to do so. Another example of this is live journalism. The New York Times Climate Hub was created on the sidelines of the COP26 zone in Glasgow. And it ran over 9 days, and it brought the rigor and strength of the Times journalism to a series of talks, debates, and high-profile exchanges. The The Climate Hub provided a space where business leaders, policymakers, technologists, scientists, climate activists, and civil society all came together to discuss how climate solutions can be effectively scaled. And last year, we continued these discussions, all focused on climate solutions, with the New York Times Climate Forward series that took place in London during London Climate Week, in New York last September during UNGA, the UN Climate Week. We took our live journalism events to San Francisco and to Sharm el-Sheikh for COP27. And we're thrilled to be here downstairs, and I hope many of you can join us this afternoon at our event. I just would like to show a very quick video clip to give you a sense of what we did last year in this space. Could you play the video? Events are another manifestation of the Times' commitment to covering the immense challenges of climate change.
Climate-forward conversations are designed to help us all make sense of these very complicated, compounding challenges. We will hear from thinkers and doers and people on the front lines of change. We'll be looking at climate change and inequality, climate change and the food crisis.
This is the age of accountability.
Those least responsible for climate change are paying the highest price.
This is about our lives. This is about our reality.
We need to double down on this transition with a sense of urgency like never before.
You have to demand. If you don't, nothing's going to change.
There's this global climate injustice.
Many countries within the global south are not responsible for the rise in the global emissions.
Do you accept the scientific consensus that the man-made burning of fossil fuels is rapidly and dangerously warming the planet?
I'm not a scientist. What we need to do is move forward with impactful projects.
We're going to move on, but that was about as close to an answer as I believe we're going to get.
We have to put money where our mouth is.
We take action.
Time for us to let them pay the bill.
We have everything we need to solve this crisis, save political will.
I know we will get to a low carbon, no carbon economy.
Climate finance is the most important issue at this COP and going forward.
Offshore wind is now the cheapest form of energy in the UK. Nobody would have believed that possible 20 years ago.
You cannot fight the climate crisis in a fragmented world trading system.
We are waiting for the money. We don't want to wait for the money.
They have had perhaps the best year in history at a moment that the globe is experiencing energy poverty.
What we're dealing with in terms of energy supply, the cost of energy, the answers to all of these things are the same answers that we need to find for the climate crisis.
We are going to prevail. The remaining question is whether we will win it in time.
So to conclude, we in the media, we not only have a role to play to report accurately on the climate crisis, we must constantly strive to bring the stories in all their complexity to life. The story of climate change is too important not to. Thank you very much.
네, 정말 귀한 말씀 전해.
Thank you once again, President Stephen Dunbar-Johnson of the New York Times International. Thank you.
Johnson. And you could have told me that you took that photo last week, and I could have believed you. So, 네, 다시 한번 감사합니다.
Thank you very much.
다시 한번
Thank you very much. The speech gave us much food for thought. Thank you very much. Following the special speech, we will go on to the keynote presentations. We have two keynote speakers in the lineup today. We have first Vice President Yolyn, Vice President of Google at the Asia Pacific, and she will speak to us under the title of Building Technology That Helps People Do More for the planet.
Of Asia Pacific at Google Global Partnerships. Please welcome her with a big round of applause. 큰 박수로 모시겠습니다.
Please welcome her with a big round of applause.
I am significantly shorter than Stephen, so pause for the mic to be adjusted. A very warm welcome to everyone here today, and thank you for joining us at today's World Climate Industry Expo Business Summit. I'd just like to start by expressing our sincere gratitude to the Ministry of Trade, Industry, and Energy and the Korea Energy Agency for their support and the participation for this event. It's a real honor for me to be able to stand in front of this room of experts to speak about our actions on sustainability. And I am so grateful, actually, that the preceding speech by Mr. Stephen Dunbar-Johnson spoke about action, the need to have an action-based narrative, and the ability to focus on what we start as opposed to in addition to what we stop. That's some of what I hope to share with this audience today about the actions that Google has taken on this journey. When Google was founded more than 2 decades ago, it was founded against the mission to organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful to everyone. At the heart of that mission is also a goal to be able to provide all individuals with information that can help sustain our planet as well. And what you see on this slide are some of the milestones from the first 2 decades of our climate action. In 2007, we became the first major company to be carbon neutral for our operations. A decade later, in 2017, we've reached 10 consecutive years of carbon neutrality, and we became the first major company to match 100% of our annual electricity with renewable energy. In 2020, we issued $5.75 billion in sustainability bonds. At the time, this was the largest issuance in green bonds by any company at that point. Even though we have hit some of our RE100 goals, we have decided as a company that that is simply not enough. There are still backup diesel usage at our data center. We still need to make further progress in this regard. And as a result, one of the commitments that we have made is to aim to achieve net zero emissions across all of our operations and value chains by 2030. What this means for us, fundamentally, is that sustainability can no longer just be an additional work stream, or to Mr. Stephen Dunbar-Johnson's point, a set of checkboxes. Sustainability needs to be a value, a business value that cuts across all aspects of our businesses. And in our 3rd decade of climate action to realize a carbon-free future, our intent is to achieve this through 3 pillars. The first is we have to lead from inside our own house at Google. This includes looking at our data centers, defining carbon-free energy across our operations, building sustainable workplaces, and incorporating those practices as well into our devices and services. But there is a second half to this as well, which is even if we were able to do these practices within Google's own operations, we believe we can play an even bigger role sharing this technology, these measurable insights, to help others, like our partners, nonprofits, researchers, policymakers, to create action plans that help scale their own climate action proposals. Further, with products that touch billions of users, we believe that we can also share actionable solutions for each of those individuals to be able to make sustainable choices each and every day. And I'm going to go through a few of those examples. At Google, we're working towards net zero emissions in 3 stages. The first is advancing carbon-free energy across our global operations. This includes, for example, testing battery-based backup solutions at our data centers. We are also reducing emissions within our value chain, working with suppliers to be able to look at ways to do that and monitor and track. We are also addressing residual carbon emissions within our other products as well. So these include investing in areas that we have technology in. This includes investing in other carbon and methane destruction and removal technologies as well. And within our data centers, we have expended significant efforts to figure out the best ways to squeeze the most out of every watt of power that we consume. Our efforts have paid off. On average, a Google data center is twice as energy efficient as a typical enterprise data center. Compared to 5 years ago, what we are seeing is that we now deliver around 5 times as much computing power with the same amount of electrical power. In terms of carbon-free energy, for 5 consecutive years, we have matched 100% of the electricity consumption of our global operations with renewable energy. And in sustainable workplaces, this particular image that looks like a circus tent is actually our new Bayview offices in Mountain View. The sections of the roof that look like tentage are actually interlocking dragon scale, what we call dragon scale solar panels that are able to capture solar energy 365 days of the year and adjustable to meet the angle of the sun. As a result, 40% of our new Bayview campus electricity comes from its solar panels, and the building itself produces more fresh water than it uses. Around this building, we have planted 15 acres of native habitat on our Bay Area campuses and restored and created this ecosystem. Beyond the hard numbers, I think there is an important point here. Sustainability can be attractive, sustainability can be innovative, and sustainability can make business sense. And a solar panel installation does not always have to look the same way. It can look exactly like our Bayview campus. And lastly, within our operations, one of the ways that we are sending a message that we stand behind sustainability as a business value is that in our devices, we make sure that the frames of our Pixel 7 series phones are now made of 100% recycled aluminum. And 100% of all of our shipments are carbon neutral since 2019. Once again, it's not about checking the box, but about making sure that sustainability is as core an element of business as any other goal that a business might set. And that is what ensures that we are able to embed it into every step of our operational process. But as I mentioned, that is only half of the story. We believe that as a technology company, we have the ability to share and scale the approaches that we take to an even wider audience that can help them to develop localized climate action plans that make sense. Our carbon neutral cloud services, whether someone is using Google at home or as part of an organization running Google Cloud or Google Workspace, all of the products in our cloud are carbon neutral. And this is mattering more to consumers today and businesses today than ever before. Our Environmental Insights Explorer is a service in which we are taking actionable insights from maps, insights such as building emissions, transportation emissions, rooftop solar potential, treetop canopy coverage, and allowing these to be estimated over a consistent geographical scale that covers today almost 42,000 cities in the world. The truth is, we can't manage what we cannot measure. And by actions like this, we are providing cities with a way to define the action plans that make sense for them and to measure and track progress and to achieve consensus from the community. This is one of the important ways that we believe technology can help scale and support the planet. A little closer to home, every time an individual makes a decision such as EV charging. You can look for EV charging stations on Google Maps. You can search for the number of plugs. You can see whether or not these are occupied. And each of these little actions on a daily basis allows a user to make a choice that's sustainable and also removes the barrier to making those sustainable choices. Once again, with eco-friendly routing on maps, we use algorithms to calculate the most fuel-saving way to get home. And this is another important point. Sustainability is not an add-on. It can be a part of your life, and a part of your life that helps you save fuel costs and that makes practical sense. When my team prepared this slide, I'm sure they did not realize that I was intending to purchase the 2023 Hyundai Ioniq 5. But now that I am, because of this feature, I can look to see if the number of emissions it has, how it performs relative to other cars. And once again, I have the power as an individual through this data to be able to make choices that are right for me and that are right for the planet. And lastly, for the many of you that have traveled into Busan, because of our lower carbon options on Google Flights, we're able to estimate the associated carbon emissions per seat for every flight. And I believe that when I took the flight over, I actually calculated this, and I picked the flight with negative 18% relative to the next flight. I felt slightly virtuous doing it, and that gave me confidence to make the purchase. So again, these are some of the simple ways in which technology can make this information available at the individual level to each and every person. And in their daily lives, allowing them to make those choices that make sustainability a value for them as well. But there is another even bigger impact way of using technology, which is to forecast the increasing number of climate crises that we're faced with. With flood forecasting, one of the things that we have done is being able to utilize historical rainfall data, elevation charts, topography details, current rainfall management, user alerts, and so on and so forth, to be able to give flood forecasting into at-risk communities over 80 countries in the world, and up to 7 days before the flooding occurs. This time window allows for a difference between life and death for some of the communities. And we've also been able to do a similar thing with wildfire detection, being able to project and predict boundaries of where wildfires might spread and being able to give alerts to those communities. But there is a very important point that I want to make out of these two examples. When we launched flood forecasting in countries like India and Bangladesh, we did not just put out the technology and expect everyone to individually access it. We also worked with a large community of local institutions, offline volunteers, individuals, research scientists, and individuals who were able to help us tell the stories on the ground and make sense of what the data was in a way that made sense for that local community. Our research estimates that when we did that, communities with a local volunteer were 50% more likely to be able to take advantage of that alert and to move in time. And I think that's a very important message for this group today, which is there is technological solutions that the private sector can develop, but we need partnership, we need collaboration, and we need local communities to be able to partner and work with us to be able to really deliver all of these to the maximum effect for the individual population. Basically, our planet is saying to us, it's still not enough. We need to try harder, and we need to do this all together. And so, as Google, I would like to invite all of you to partner with us in this journey to get to our common goals of carbon-free in 2030. Thank you so much.
네, 다시 한번
Thank you very much. Another big round of applause, please.
for a great presentation. 네, 기술을 통해서
Using technology to help adaptation to climate change. Thank you very much. That was a very insightful presentation.
들어보도록
Let us now go on to the next keynote presentation. And our speaker is from the WBCSD, Surbhi Singhvi, who is a manager of energy transition, and she will be talking about 24/7 carbon-free power, a new frontier in power procurement.
Manager for Energy Transformations at WBCSD. 네, 큰 박수로 모시겠습니다.
안녕하세요. And it's an honor to be in this beautiful city of Busan amongst some of the progressive government agencies, some of the leading businesses and expert organizations. So thanks a lot to the Ministry of Trade, Energy and Industry and the Korean Energy Agency for inviting us here. It's a pleasure to be here. You heard Yolyn talk about 100% renewable power. I'm going to take a step further and say it doesn't only have to be 100% over an annual basis, it has to be 24/7. Okay? So today, this is what I want to talk to you about. Quick introduction of the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. For those who don't know us, I'll talk about the new frontiers for renewable power procurement that are emerging now. Focus on one of those, which is the 24/7 access to carbon-free power, and then summarize. So for those of you who don't know us, WBCSD is a global organization made up of 200 plus organizations and companies across the world, across sectors, working hard and together to move ahead in their sustainability journeys. We have a unique business-only platform. We, of course, liaise with the government, but we take business voice to the government. And our main motto is to make sustainability profitable with the help of the businesses. This is just a quick look at our members. These are across the sectors, across the globe. Have a very simple vision, which is we want a world in which more than 9 billion people live within planetary boundaries. And we do this by accelerating the transformation of businesses, their value chains, and the systems, very importantly, the systems they operate in, to avert 3 critical challenges that the world faces: climate emergency, help in restoring nature, and tackling inequality. This is just a quick example of the work that we've done and the impact that we have, given that I'm talking about power here. One example from the power sector. Over the last 7 years, we've worked with companies across the globe in accelerating their energy transformation, helping them procure renewable power. And this is just a quick look at the impact that we've been able to have. Our members have been able to procure 51% of their total electricity usage from renewable power, which is 2.5 times more than all companies reporting to CDP, which is an organization that collects data internationally. And this has been equivalent to the entire power consumption of Argentina. Another example of us working with governments and institutes, at the G7 communique, they really accepted the avoided emissions guidance that we produced along with our members. So this was businesses, expert organizations across the globe, which then looked at how avoided emissions can be made into a standard. And now, back to energy. So energy transformation is critical for climate action, and we believe that Asia would play a key role in this. Why is energy important? Just plain numbers. Energy systems are responsible for 75% of the total greenhouse gas emissions, and power, electricity, accounts for 41% of those energy-related greenhouse gas emissions. And we believe that businesses would be at the forefront in taking and driving action towards energy transformation. and climate action. You can see the World Economic Forum reported that more than 51% of the global emissions come from the companies, whether it be state-owned or private. So we know that businesses have a big responsibility. There's just some data from across the world on how companies have been able to advance in their renewable power procurement journey. I would just point out to the one that says, from the BNEF, that says that businesses signed a record 36.7 gigawatt of corporate renewable power purchase agreements globally. This was just last year. This is 10% of the capacity that was added to the grid of renewable power, which is huge. And why do we believe that Asia has a huge potential? Of course, you've heard about arguments on the great population, the growing population of Asia, the economic growth that Asia is going to have. But this argument that I'm presenting here is a bit that is a little less talked about. It's about the fact that Asia plays a critical role in the global supply chains. China would not be a surprise to any one of us. But if you look at this chart, you can see that South Korea, even for that matter, the ASEAN region, Indonesia, they're all very critical in terms of the goods and the products they supply to other parts of the world, and hence there is an embedded carbon dioxide emissions that are associated with it. So of course, Asia is important from the perspective of what it generates, but it is also important for what it delivers to other parts of the world, and because of the embedded carbon emissions. And I don't have to repeat this, that there's a high economic risk that Asia faces if the temperatures rise to 3.2 degrees Celsius, which is where we are headed to. 26% of the region's GDP is at stake. So what's happening in the renewable power procurement area? We believe that there are a few new frontiers that are driving renewable power procurement across the globe now. You would have all heard about economics, reputation, stakeholders asking for more renewable power. They all remain as drivers, but there are a few drivers that are evolving now. And we put them in two categories based on the developments that are happening in the power system. So the power system has changed considerably from 10 years ago. And we also think that there are a number of developments in the sustainability ambition of companies. An example is Samsung within South Korea has signed up for RE100, despite South Korea presenting challenging times for renewable power uptake. So there are increased ambitions of companies. You also see that there is increase in stakeholder demand. So your stakeholders, your investors expect you to be in line with the change that is happening in the world. And the grid has changed. The way we as consumers interact with the grid has changed. In the past, we've never been prosumers. We've only been consumers. Now you can actually give back electricity to the grid and earn from it. So there is a two-way interaction that is happening with the grid that also is a new driver for you to produce and consume electricity in a manner that you can be efficient in interacting with the grid. These are the 6 leadership approaches that we think companies and countries can take going forward. And if you look at them, they're all from across the sustainability area. So gone are the times when sustainability was only about environment and emissions. It's now moving into the area of nature, equity. So what you procure and your renewable power procurement decisions would depend a lot and would be led by the fact whether you have a positive impact on the nature that is around you, whether you have a positive impact on the society that is around you. So is it a just energy transition? And are you providing 24/7 power, carbon-free power? So the problem with renewable power that we all know is that it only is around when those sources are around. And those sources are not around all the time. So are you ensuring that the grid is not suffering because of the choice that you have made for power consumption? And let me now focus on 24/7 carbon-free electricity. So what is 24/7 carbon electricity? What are the benefits and challenges? How do you procure it? And where have we seen action on this? First, what is 24/7 power? And I think that source, location, and time, they're the three very, very important factors when we are talking about 24/7 power. So you can see the definition of 24/7 power as it is defined by the UN Global Energy Compact. It means that you have every kilowatt hour of electricity that you are consuming is coming from a carbon-free source for every hour of every day. That is what is called 24/7 electricity. And let me tell you, there is no standard definition, but this is one of the definitions that are accepted currently. Why do we need it? You can see on the chart on your right that these are examples from California and Germany grid. If you are consuming 100% solar power, but that 100% is on an annual basis, then your reduction in greenhouse gas emissions are to the tune of 50%, the real reductions. If you're consuming 100% wind, because the capacity factors are a little higher, your reductions are in the range of 60 to 70%. But it's only with 24/7 power that you can actually reduce it to zero. So that is the main reason that we need 24/7 carbon-free electricity. The other reasons are that you need to increase transparency in procurement when you are disclosing to your stakeholders, when you are telling your people in the nation about how you've been procuring electricity. This gives complete transparency on how this electricity is being sourced. The other is that it also incentivizes new build of carbon-free infrastructure, which is very much needed to promote carbon-free procurement. And how you do it? First of all, you identify, and very importantly, you identify the demand areas. So you look at where, and I said that location and time are two very, very important parts of this 24/7 power. While we sometimes only focus on supply side, so where this energy is coming from, we forget to focus on demand. And even when we focus on demand, our main motto is to reduce demand, be energy efficient, which is great. Another step that we should be taking in demand is to look at how we can shift it. So one, you reduce the demand, optimize it. But second, how do you shift it to areas as well as the time zones or time hours or hours where carbon-free power is being produced? So I could give you an example of South Korea. South Korea, I understand that the southern part of the country is where most of the renewable power is concentrated, but the demand centers lie on the northern part of the country. Can South Korea as a country look at how demand centers or some of the demand centers can be shifted to the southern part of the country so that, one, you don't need that amount of grid infrastructure to extend and to produce, to supply the renewable power or carbon-free power to the demand centers, and two, it's just more efficient. So demand is a very important part of 24/7. The second thing that I would like to point out to is technologies. So once you've optimized demand, you look at which technologies could help you make that mismatch between the supply and demand. And they can be different depending on where you are present, where your operations are, and at what times of the day and year are you operating. And then a very important part as well is collaboration between the government and the private sector. We don't think that 24/7 power can work out without a close collaboration. And just to focus on that point here, we believe that the public sector plays not only a key role in putting in place the appropriate policies, but it also plays a key role in ensuring that the market design and the regulations are in line with supporting flexibility sources. We also think that there is a need to optimize the generation mix. So the public sector needs to, for a country, the public sector needs to look at what the optimized mix of generation is. So it can be different for different locations and different countries, depending on where they are located, what resources they have access to. But it's very important to be technology neutral when you're talking about 24/7 power. You want to go to a place where you have access to carbon-free power, which is needed for climate action. Don't have biases for which technology you should be choosing. Go with where the location is and look at what the optimal mix is. And the private sector, of course, the need is, one, first of all, to create a very strong demand. So have the demand so that the ecosystem can be put in place. And then work on the solutions. So innovation also happens from the private sector. And very importantly, the financial sources. So these are quick. In summary, these are the principles for 24/7 power that we see are critical. Location, I already mentioned. Time, I already mentioned. It's also important, additionality comes in, and I'm sorry for using a technical term here, but what additionality really means is that you are creating new projects rather than using the existing projects. So it's important for you to not only bank on the existing projects, but create new projects which are providing carbon-free power. And it has to be 24/7. Carbon-free electricity is a very systems-level concept. It has to make system efficient. So you'll see later, but not every company has to be 24/7. It has to be at the system level that we have to be 24/7. And like all good things, this also comes with its sets of challenges. The reason I have reiterated the benefits here is it's good to see that these challenges exist, but this is what it gives us, so it's worth it. The challenges are, and this is a general one, that there are high costs attached with adopting these technologies. I would say that we can't have a general blanket of high costs. It really depends on where you are and what operations you have, and you can actually get to a commercially viable solution. I can give you an example of our work in India that we did on energy storage. There's been a lot of talk about adopting energy storage to make the grid flexible, and everyone in India said that this doesn't make commercial sense right now, we're not adopting it right now. We only worked with a handful of utilities, the distribution utilities, as well as the commercial and industrial consumers, where we looked at where exactly it makes sense, for what applications. And we gave them exactly those applications and what the commercials look like. And I'm very proud to say that there are a couple of projects that have already come out, which are going to be the torchbearers for other projects. So when you hear high cost as an argument, please don't fall for it under a general blanket. There is, of course, a lack of standardization, but all of this develops when the market develops. And for companies in specific, these are some of the incentives for taking up 24/7 carbon-free electricity. So apart from GHG reductions, it also helps you in ESG disclosure. So you have to be more transparent. Your stakeholders are asking for more disclosure and transparent disclosure. And very importantly, it helps you gain and increase your access to capital markets. This is a quick look at how you can procure 24/7 carbon-free power. I would just touch upon these steps. First of all, very important is to have the right data. If you do not have the data for hourly consumption or even more granular consumption, you cannot look at 24/7. So ensure that in a country, in a company, you have the right data tools to analyze and to manage. Second one, I would like to re-emphasize, optimize demand, both reduce and shift. Look at various technology options. Look at your procurement decision should also be based on the suitability and the assessment of emissions abatement potential. So what is the new project that you are investing in replacing, and what is its abatement potential? Set for yourself gradually increasing 24/7 targets, be realistic, and then look at what the local grid scenario is and what is the type of resource mix that you can focus on. And then you evaluate various market-based instruments to trade as well, and then you go back, review, and then look at your targets again, which is an important point. I'm just very happy to give examples of companies that have already started doing this, and very happy to say that 2 of these companies are already in the panel today, Google and Microsoft. So these are some of the examples of projects that they have taken up across the globe to procure 24/7 renewable power. I would just like to draw your attention to the column which says hourly. And it has, you would notice that it doesn't all have 100%. It has 90%, it has 92%, which is a very important aspect. When we're looking at 24/7, let's not all look at 100%, because by the nature of electricity, you cannot be efficient if every small consumption block is going to be 24/7. And it's only these big companies like Google and Microsoft Benz that can, Mercedes-Benz, that can do it. Smaller companies can even look for lower percentages. Important aspect is to be efficient at the systems level. Given that there are a number of mayors here as well, I would just like to point out the progressive cities as well that have taken this initiative. So it's not a corporate thing only, it goes to a city level. And then I would just like to focus on how you can progress and how you can accelerate your 24/7 journey. There are a number of global organizations that exist that are full of companies, organizations, and countries that are all looking at advancing their 24/7 journey. Unfortunately, at the global fora, the voice of Asian companies is not as well heard as for other countries. And that is not because it's not given the weightage, it's mainly because Asian companies are not present. So I would really encourage companies in Asia and even governments in Asia to take part in the global fora, take part in organizations that collect these different organizations from across the world and raise your voice. Because we often hear that global standards do not adhere to the Asian policy framework or region. That's why we need more voice. Last slide. We strongly believe that the ESG criteria will be very well integrated into power procurement decisions. Until now, most of us have been looking at just our impact on environment, but it's going to go beyond environment. And even within environment, it's going to go beyond just direct GHG reduction. So you can see, you should look at the life cycle assessment of the project. So not only where are the materials going after the project life is over? How are they being mined? How are they being refined? Social acceptance. When you're looking at the generation mix, it's very important to see what the people you're catering to believe about the resources. So social acceptance, given its impact on safety, health, pollution, all of that is very important. The impact on surrounding nature, both living and non-living organisms is very important. And on the government side, I would, of course, ESG disclosures and transparency in procurement is important, but the diversification of generation mix is also important for energy security reasons. We've seen, if you focus on just a few, even if it is just renewables, if you focus on just solar or just wind, it's going to, one, it is inefficient, and two, it makes you dependent on a specific supply chain. So diversify depending on where you are. Just reiterating the key messages, diversify the power generation mix, reduce power demand and shift it close to both in time and location to carbon-free energy supply. Public and private sector collaboration is very important. And at the corporate level, 24/7 is not Bible. 24/7 is not a target for everyone. 24/7 target is mainly for larger corporations because they have larger demand. They have a little bit of a higher responsibility, but others can do with sub 24/7 level targets depending on what is efficient for the entire system. Kamsahamnida. Thank you so much.
네, 정말 좋은 발표.
Yes, thank you very much for that great presentation.
네, 귀한 말씀 전해 주셨습니다.
Thank you very much for that wonderful presentation. Once again, a big round of applause.
네, 그러면
Yes, we'll now go into the panel discussion.
을 위해서는 잠시
For the panel discussion, we will rearrange the stage. We would like to ask you to remain seated as we will start with the panel discussion right away as soon as the stage is ready. We have heard the special speech followed by 2 keynote presentations. I do believe that there's a common thread. We have heard President Stephen Dunbar-Johnson quoting various people, and it was indeed a very inspiring special speech. This is something that I jotted down. We're on the way to climate hell with the foot on the accelerator. We are on the way to climate hell with the foot on the accelerator. And so in the end, there is a role to be played by the media in enlightening people about the severity of climate change. It was indeed very inspiring. Thank you very much for your special speech. And then we heard 2 keynote speakers from Google and WBC. We have heard from manager Surbhi Singhvi, and the 2 keynote speakers indeed provided us with very informative presentations, and they will be invited as a member of the panel as well. Despite it being the morning hours, we still have many people joining us today. The Grand Ballroom is quite a large hall, but we actually needed to add chairs to provide seating for everyone who joined us today. Thank you very much once again. As soon as the stage is ready, we will be inviting the panelists up on stage for their panel discussions. We will be inviting 2 keynote speakers back up to the stage, and the session will be moderated by Professor Lee Jae-yuk of Seoul National University. We have Vice President Lee Sung-yeol of SK Eco Plant. We have Head of the Environment and Energy Research Institute and Kim En-chang, Mr. Kim Sung-woo. We have President Jens Orfeld from RWE and Director Kwon Ho-sung of MS Korea. I do believe that the stage is set for the panel discussion. We would now like to invite all of the panelists to the stage with a big round of applause.
our panelists as well as our moderator for our panel discussion. 네, 무대 위로 모시겠습니다. Please join us up on stage for our panel discussion. 네, 그리고 현장에 계시는 분들은
And also for those of you here, we are providing simultaneous interpretation in English and Korean, so please utilize your receiver. Channel number 1 is Korean and number 2 is English. Our moderator, as soon as he is up on stage, we will begin the panel discussion. So I think we are ready to begin.
Microphones right next to you. 네, 준비되셨으면 이제
And if you are ready, I would like to hand over the microphone to our moderator. Yes, good morning. As was introduced, I am Professor Lee Jae-hyuk of Korea University. I welcome you to this ESG session of the Business Summit. We have a tight schedule. We have heard from 2 keynote speakers, and we have our panelists here. We will listen to the panelists speak and then go into a general discussion. So first off, I would like to invite our first panelist. Please go ahead.
네, 안녕하십니까?
Good morning. I am from SK Eco Plant. I am in charge of ESG. I am Lee Sung-yeol. Thank you very much for this opportunity to participate in this session. SK Eco Plant has started a new business model as a company that is working to become greener. So let me share our story with you. SK Group, where we belong to, is going through a deep change, and we have announced that we will be incorporating the double bottom line, which means that we will strive to achieve economic value and social value together. Against this backdrop, SK Ecoplant has given a lot of thought into what are the social problems that we can solve as a company at SK Ecoplant. The social issue that we chose was environment. For a sustainable society, what can we do and what must we do? And as you're well aware, the humankind is faced with the challenge of climate change, and we were a construction company, and the construction industry is closely linked to circular economy because we use a lot of materials for our work. And so we wanted to become a company that finds environmental solutions. And so in May of 2021, we changed our name from SK ENC to SK Ecoplant. Ecoplant means that we are planting the eco-friendly seeds for a tomorrow. During the last 2 years, ever since we changed our name in 2021, we have put in a lot of effort, and there are 4 core businesses within SK Group, and SK Ecoplant became the main part of the green pillar. When we changed our name, we also came up with a new mission and vision. Our vision is to become the circular economy designer. We wish to contribute to the circular economy as a company. And during the last 2 years, because we are in the construction industry, we gave a lot of thought into how we can become an eco-friendly company, and we conducted a series of M&As. So a total of about 12 companies became a part of our company, and we have a wide portfolio of companies that have joined us on our journey. We started with EMC, which is a company that does waste and water treatment. TESS is a global new waste company. We also have SK Ocean Plant, which is a offshore wind farm company. We also work with various landfill companies, and we also have a company that changes waste plastic into recycled plastic. And so what we have achieved during the last 2 years is to come up with a business portfolio on 3 pillars. The 3 pillars are namely environment, energy, and solution. For the environment pillar, as we mentioned before, we acquired EMC, and so we actually have the #1 environmental company as a part of our portfolio, and we wish to actually focus on the upstream of the waste treatment industry. For the downstream, it's mostly about burning and burying waste, and so what we have is a large dream of making zero waste by focusing on the upstream. For energy, in Korea, we have great competitiveness for fuel cells in Korea, and so we wish to use that competitiveness to enter new markets. Our dream is to provide green hydrogen. And so we have been working on building technologies, and last week we had a very meaningful project that we announced, which I will share with you in detail in the later part of my presentation. For the construction part, we focus on solution. It is connecting energy and environment together to provide green solutions. And so these are the 3 pillars of our company. For the environment pillar, we are working on making inroads to the global market, but we do have strategies that are differentiated depending on the region. For the advanced markets, we will be focusing on the upstream, mostly on recycling. And for Southeast Asia, we will be focusing on the downstream. So, for example, advancing the landfill industry to make it much more eco-friendly. We are embedding various technologies to make this come true. For the energy sector, last week with a Canadian company, we announced phase 1 of our project, and this project actually is the first stage for green hydrogen. In Korea, we believe that this project is very meaningful because we would be able to export our hydrogen. And when we changed our name in 2021, we had various projects that we announced, but I do believe that this is the most meaningful thus far. In Canada, they have onshore wind farms that actually creates electricity that leads to electrolysis that can create hydrogen, which can be converted to ammonia. And so we have a plan for ammonia conversion on site. What we can do is use this hydrogen and ammonia that is produced to export to Germany and other European countries. The Canadian government is very much interested in this project, and they are wishing to see phase 2 and phase 3 of this project. And so I do believe that this project can help us export hydrogen to countries around the world. For solution, this is the existing EPC business. As I mentioned before, we are incorporating various solutions into the EPC industry. For example, carbon neutral industrial park or low carbon construction materials. Those are some of the efforts that we are making for the EPC business. Thus far, I have talked about various businesses, but because we have 12 subsidiaries that have joined our company, we needed to have a ESG vision to encompass all of these companies. And so in June of 22, we held a BOD meeting to announce the ESG vision, and in particular, the 5 domains of compliance, human rights, safety and health, environment, and quality are the areas that we focus on. Our core value is save the earth. This is the core value of SK Eco Plant. So all members of SK Eco Plant are called EPIs. They are eco people. And so all of the EPIs are working to include save the earth in all aspects of ourselves and our work. And so we will do our best to create a better tomorrow. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your presentation. The first presentation was by Vice President Lee Sung-yeol of SK Eco Plant, and as you have just heard, construction companies are very sensitive to green issues, but you have actually made the effort of changing your name and also working for the circular economy. We will go on to further discussions, but one of the things that you did mention was that because ESG is a global issue, we need to go beyond the domestic perspective. And I do believe that this will also have an impact for companies around the world.
And our next speaker is Mr. Kim Sung-woo, who's head of Environment and Energy Research Institute of Kim Min-jung Law Firm. Please go ahead. Yes, thank you very much. And thank you to the organizers for inviting me. I am here, and I have been listening to the carbon-related stories by the representatives of different companies from the private sector. Today, I would like to talk about a slightly different topic, and that would be on the issue of strengthening the competitiveness of businesses. Now, I am part of the Green Growth Committee of Korea, and I have been looking into the issue of carbon emissions, and also at the same time I'm on a committee to provide advice on trade issues, and so I have been very interested in the issue of trade policies and carbon emissions. So I will be talking about issues that combine the two together, and also how we can strengthen business competitiveness going forward. We have heard from our keynote speaker from the WBCSD, and she talked about the role of Asia, and also there's a lot of trade of embedded carbon in the products that are being traded. And what I'm going to talk about is a little bit related to that. So, carbon emissions, well, you can see that issues related to carbon has been being reflected into new policies that have been introduced. There was a lot of talk about this, but we can see that, in fact, there has been new legislative initiatives taking place around the world, including CBAM of EU. EU is starting this from this year. If this is applied only to EU, then the impact would be limited. But I think that right now there's a working group between EU and US on this topic, and there will be agreement reached by October of this year. And also, in a different context, if you think about this linkage between climate and trade, as you know, there is an IRA of the US, and we know all about this in Korea because of the battery issue and how it impacts the Korean industries. So the IRA will be coming up with the rules under the IRA soon. And also, the legislative process is ongoing. So what this means is that starting from this year, we will see more detailed rules coming out. And the background for this is, of course, to reduce the carbon emissions, but also at the same time to foster domestic industries in the countries that are pushing with such legislative initiatives. The IRA, well, how is this linked with the trade policy and carbon emissions? Well, for the projects that help reduce carbon emissions, subsidies are provided. And so it is a policy to make sure that there is industry promotion here. And also this is for net zero leakage. And also, so for EU TCTF, the subsidies will be provided to protect the EU industries. And for EU CBAM also, this is to stop the carbon leakage, to make sure that the CBAM will ensure the carbon price of imports is equivalent to the carbon price of domestic production. So as you can see, this is to drop carbon emissions, but at the same time to foster domestic industries. And also, these will have an impact on the technology price and also technology security. Of course, that is why it will have an impact on the bottom line of the companies. And, well, for IRA, as you can see here, for example, a technology that would cost 100 Korean won, for example, because of IRA, the cost can go down because tax credits will be provided, and this reduces the cost of generating renewable energy. And also the issues that are related to the energy security. Well, yesterday during the business summit, some of the keynote speakers talked about this, but China currently, when it comes to the carbon neutrality technology, China tops the list. So in response to this, there's IRA, there's EU CRMA, and also there are policies implemented to reduce the dependency on imports. And we will see this kind of trend strengthening as we go forward. Then what should businesses do to strengthen their competitiveness? Now, I think that because the trade policies are now reflecting these climate issues, and one of the reasons for that is because the countries want to foster their domestic industries, I think that we have to think about, through the value chain, how we can reduce carbon emissions. And also, in terms of ESG, well, this is a little bit different from what is being demanded by the stakeholders in terms of ESG. There has to be carbon emissions cuts, and one of the effective measures would be utilizing patent data. Now, we do a lot of analysis about the patents. But for example, here, there is hydrogen, and there's about 400,000 documents related to the hydrogen-related global patents data. So there was an analysis about the new technology, the existing technology related to the hydrogen industry value chain. And when you do a deep dive into such data, you can identify the direction that you should take as a company to benefit from this new trend of trade policies that is linked with the climate issue. So if you are interested about how competitors are doing, you can utilize the patent-related data of your respective industry. This can help you set a direction for you to enhance your competitiveness going forward in relation with this new trade policy environment. So Also, now it is important to reduce your product's carbon footprint. Well, in the past, there was the carbon certifications or labeling. So I think that the marketing aspect was stronger in the past. But now, really, you have to think about how the climate issue is being reflected in the trade policies. For example, in EV, there was a new law implemented or introduced in France. Subsidies will be provided for EVs, but where these cars, if these vehicles are manufactured, and the carbon percentage among the total power mix in the manufacturing countries will determine the amount of bonus or subsidies that will be provided. So why did France decide to go on and implement this kind of a new law? Well, this is because China emits about 50% more than France when it comes to carbon emissions. And so, if you reduce the carbon footprint, there will be more benefits provided to you or your business. And last but not least, I wrote down the example of the steel industry. Now, sometimes EVs, they promote the product saying that this EV is very environment friendly. But if you look at the materials that are used, for example, the steel, if it's not that green or not that environmentally friendly, then the environmentally friendliness or the green aspect of the EVs would be substantially hurt. So that is why we are seeing also a move towards the green product generation in the steel industry as well. But the new technology is more expensive. And also, the steel industry actually, in order to make a more green steel, there has to be collaboration. For example, the stakeholders. There has to be those who are willing to pay a premium for these green steel. And also there has to be the investors who are willing to invest. And also there has to be a supplier ecosystem to distribute these environment-friendly steel. And also we need the new regulations that can support this. So you have to take all of this into account when you come up with your new business plans. Thank you very much. Yes, thank you. So he just gave a couple of examples from the business and industry side, and I'm sure that all of you are interested in the issue of ESG. There are many new concepts, IRA and also CBAM and also RE100, biodiversity. But as it was just mentioned by Mr. Kim, we can see this from the perspective of interest. But I do believe that in the current reality, well, the countries want to pursue their interests and also develop their domestic industries. And based on my expertise, actually, in the past, trade policies were used to gain, to have the businesses gain competitiveness against the companies that already have competitiveness. But anyhow, thank you very much for your presentation. Let's go on to our third panelist.
Next, we would like to invite Jens Orfeld, APEC President of RWE.
Much. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I think it's really an honor to speak amongst such esteemed speakers and also such an esteemed audience. Just on the final point here, I think that's a very valid one in relation to trade policies. We've seen in the last year and rapid acceleration of the energy transition in Europe coming out of the war in Ukraine. And I think for me, that's a key message to not only the Korean government, but governments across the world to be cognizant of the fact that you are not only in a climate fight, but you're also in a fight with other governments for attention and with developers and supply chain for investor attraction. And I think that's a point that we shouldn't neglect when we talk about ESG challenges, is what we as corporates can do, but also what the government can do to sort of provide the soil for ESG to really flourish. I'd like to speak a little bit about solutions. Stephen from New York Times talked about, we were talking a lot about what we should stop doing. I'd like to talk a little bit about what we can start doing here in Korea and what we are already doing in RWE. So we are a utility much like KEPCO and GENCO. We have 125 years of experience. We're celebrating actually this year our 125th anniversary. And like many other utilities, we grew out of the problem, you might say. So we have a strong history in conventional power, in lignite, in coal and nuclear. And our company is still part of the problem, but we are, as you will also hear in a second, on a journey towards also reaching net zero carbon neutrality, and in the process of phasing out some of our coal-producing and lignite-producing power plants. The German government has decided that we should phase out our nuclear power plants, so that's also part of what we're doing at the moment. Our company is basically divided into 4 different sectors, which is the power that I already talked about. It's about RWE generation. We're also heavily, like it was mentioned from EXPO Ecoplant, involved in the development and production of electrolyzers. We have a goal of providing 1 gigawatt at least of electrolyzers by 2030. Then we have our supply and trading leg, and then the company that I'm representing today, which is RWE Renewables. We have within our portfolio approximately 12 gigawatts of renewable activities, mainly centered around offshore wind, onshore wind, and PV solar, but also very much engaged in other types of renewable energy and energy storage. We're active in Americas, in Europe, and in Asia Pacific. We have a plan of investing 50 billion euros by 2030 with the aim of deploying 50 gigawatts of net green capacity. We believe that we're uniquely qualified to be the partner of choice for governments across the globe because of our in-depth experience. So we as a utility are a build-to-operate outlet and a build-to-operate mentality. And that means that whatever we develop, we own the issues that we tackle along the way because we own and operate the assets for the full life cycle and also decommission them. We currently have 19 different assets from an offshore wind perspective in operation across Europe, and we are having almost a similar amount of auction secured projects or otherwise secured projects either in development or under construction. I'd like to touch just on one of those projects, which is the TOR project, also from an ESG point of view, because on this particular project we are going over and beyond just developing green producing assets. We're also utilizing the latest technology in the sense that we are using recyclable blades, and for I think about 40% of the turbines or the foundations, we're using greener steel, also with the aim of reducing carbon emissions. And the only reason why we're not doing it for the full plant is we simply couldn't secure more. So we're really stepping up our ambition when it comes to sustainability. As I said, we have an aim of being climate neutral by 2040. But we're also going beyond that. As a father of 3 children, 1 boy and 2 girls. Diversity in the workforce is very, very important for me personally. I want to make sure that everybody within our company has equal opportunities independent of gender or race or ethnicity. And I think within the company we have more than 80 different nationalities. And just by comparison, in our Japanese office where I'm located, I think we have about 65% local staff and 35% international, and just between roughly around 50 people, we have almost, I think it's 17 different nationalities represented, and that's something that we are particularly proud of. We're also particularly proud of the fact that more than 90% of our investments are aligned with the EU taxonomy investment guidelines, and that we are massively deploying and redistributing our recycled capital into sustainable investments. We're stepping up on also in relation to future energy. I very much agree with the statement that was made also prior that it has to be a wholesome energy mix, that we can't just rely on one resource. And for that reason, we are within offshore wind, taking steps forward towards also deploying floating offshore wind, which is particularly relevant for this part of the world where sea depths become quite deep quite early, and you also minimize the visual impacts from the shore. We're working, as I mentioned, with projects on system integration. We've recently won up to 800 megawatt project in the Netherlands based on system integration, where it's all about deploying electrolyzers, having offshore solar plants in between the offshore wind farm. We're also looking at things like artificial fisheries to be able to create new job opportunities for fishermen that might otherwise be without opportunities. And I'd like to give just a brief example. So this is from a project that we've done in the UK, our Gwynty Moor project. And it's just to put things in perspective, because when we talk about deploying offshore green assets, we not always talk about the social benefits that derive from it. So for that project alone, during the construction phase, we created more than 700 jobs. And for the long-term duration of the assets, which is set to run for some good 25 to 30 years, we've created more than 100 jobs. We have ongoing investments coming into the Welsh economy just from this one project, around £8 million every single year of operation. We are massively looking to upskill not just our own workforce, but also the societies in which we function. So we work closely together with universities. We are in the midst of actually setting up various different university programs also here in Asia to ensure that the workforce can be educated as fast as possible. And we always apply a common approach to how we do offshore development. So whilst we have 25 years of experience in doing so, we recognize that there are many aspects of local economy, of local stakeholder management, of grid connection, etc., where we are less experts. So that's why we're always looking for the right and dedicated partners to do this venture together with us so that we can be the right and the trusted partner for, in this case, the Korean government. This particular project was interesting also because we have supported local communities with 19 million into a local community in fund over the lifetime of the period. And very often we also allow for mezzanine loans so that the local communities can actually take an equity stake in the projects in which we operate and construct. I think I'm a little bit over time, so I'll stop here, but thank you very much for allowing me for the opportunity to speak.
네, 감사합니다.
Thank you very much. Well, actually, carbon neutrality and energy are areas where you touched upon. This session is titled ESG Management, but we are discussing is mostly focused on energy. But as he has mentioned in the later part of your presentation, you did balance out your presentation with the participation of the local community. Let's invite the last presenter of the session.
From MS Korea, we have with us Director Kwon Ho-sung. Please go ahead. Yes, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me. Already, we've heard a lot from the outstanding speakers and panelists, so I'll make my remarks very short. Microsoft, basically, well, as it is stated in our mission, we are committed to harnessing the power of technology to help everyone, everywhere, build a more sustainable future. ESG and sustainability. What can businesses and organizations do? Well, when we think about this issue, the role of Microsoft, we believe, is to enable them to do more with the power of technology. One of the key points that I heard today is that we can't do everything alone. We have to work together and cooperate, and I think that's the takeaway for me. Then, Microsoft, in order to work together, Well, what do we need? I believe that we need standardization, a solution, or a process. And so today, I would like to talk about a standardized solution or a standardized process. What kind of work Microsoft has done to make that, create that, and what we have to offer. As you know, Microsoft, has received a AAA rating from Morgan Stanley in its ESG evaluations for 5 consecutive years. And for the past couple of years, Microsoft has been able to reach 2-digit growth for many years. For cloud and through AI technology, we have been able to grow by a little bit more than 20%. And as you know, as businesses grow, there's a lot of carbon emissions. If there's more demand, we provide more products and services, and that leads to more carbon emissions. But last week, we issued our annual report for 2022, and we were able to show that compared to the previous year of 2021, well, from scope 1 or 2, we have been able to reduce carbon emissions by 30%. So we have been receiving questions about how Microsoft has been able to grow our business, but at the same time lower our carbon emissions year on year. Well, so let me explain what we've been up to make this possible. Well, this is a major challenge that we are faced with. This challenge, we have to solve it together. And for that also, a very strong commitment is required. In 2019, our leadership, top leadership, has declared that carbon negative and zero waste and water positive are something that we will pursue. And we announced this worldwide. So from our employees' perspective, in the beginning, there were some views that, is this such a serious matter? But now there's been about 4 years since we announced this. And this was not just rhetoric or not just simple pledges that we have stated. We have been very serious in actually implementing these goals. Starting from 10 years ago, starting from 2009, well, it's more than 10 years ago, we've started our carbon journey. And as it was mentioned before, we want to meet our goals by 2030 to become carbon negative, to become zero waste, and to become water positive. So it's been a little over 50 years since our company has been established, and we want to get rid of the carbon that has been emitted over those 50 or plus years. That is one of the goals that we have established, very ambitious goal. And once again, this is not just rhetoric, this is an action that we really will and have to take. And so we want all of the applications that we are operating, there's thousands, there are tens of thousands of them. We've migrated all of them to the cloud. And number 2, as it was mentioned by Google as well, in our headquarters campus, all of the buildings have been transformed into smart buildings, smart constructions. And also we have been working on reducing the energy consumption in these buildings, utilizing AI technology and new innovative technology. And number 3, I think that this is quite interesting. Well, as you know, in our data center, we're number 2. We're a number 2 public cloud provider. So we have 45 data centers around the world. And as you know, data centers, well, they're being criticized a lot, because data centers really emit a lot of carbon. And so the data centers have been really negatively criticized and viewed by the media, for example. But we have been working on renewables. And so we've established the Microsoft Circular Center. all of the energy that's been used at our data centers has been turned into renewables. We're now using renewables at our data centers. We're trying to reduce the use of water at our data centers. And so that's the direction that we've been taking for our data center operations. For example, the data center we have in Sweden, it has already been transformed into Microsoft Circular Center, and it's a future-oriented next-generation data center. You might have read about this in the news as well, but for the past 3 to 4 years, there has been some questions asked about why are the data centers all on land? How about making the data centers go underwater? And then if there's a lot of heat generated, the seawater can be utilized to cool the heat. Wouldn't that make the data center operation more efficient? And so we are in the process of piloting this concept. And based on our pilot project, we have seen some significant outcomes. And we will be pushing with this project, this concept, so that we can achieve commercialization of the underwater data centers. And also we have been working on reducing the use of disposables. This is also what other companies are doing. And also we are very interested in carbon tax. We have adopted Microsoft internal carbon tax. So there's about a 15 cents per ton of carbon tax that's applied. So every accounting year, at the end of accounting, for every accounting year, we have each department or team lay out their targets for their carbon emissions. And if these teams go beyond their targets, then we have them pay carbon tax. And so we have the carbon investment fund that we have, and we utilize it as funding for our efforts in relation to carbon emission reductions. So we have that internal carbon tax that we've implemented. And last but not least, we have a collaboration platform in place. And so in the past, we would organize a really big annual event. And these events would invite about tens of thousands of people. We thought that we could do more in terms of reducing carbon emissions coming from these events. So we've transitioned to online events. And of course, there was a pandemic starting from 2 years ago. That's why we decided to transform our events into either online or hybrid format. And so every time we hold these online events, we have been reducing about 5,000 tons of carbon emissions. So 500 tons, that would be equivalent to about 400,000 units of cars being operated or driven each day. So we have the experience and the practices that we have been pursuing. And we also have a lot of B2B platforms. And we have been thinking about how we can help other businesses with our expertise. And so we've launched the Microsoft Cloud for Sustainability. We've launched this as a new SaaS solution. And so we've actually combined the fragmented data and systems together so that the businesses can create reports and monitor their carbon-related activities and also take action to reduce their carbon footprint. So this is something that we are now providing to our clients. I have a link here, so if you want more information, if you are interested, please follow the link. You can do a trial, you can look at related information and find out more. So I invite you to take a further look. Thank you very much. Yes, thank you very much. So we have just heard from all 4 panelists, and I think that all of them mentioned on very significant issues and topics. They were all over time, all 4 of them, so that's fair, but we are a bit short of time. We initially had thought that it would be good to raise questions to our keynote speakers. So if the panelists do have any questions for our keynote speakers, you can go ahead. But first, I have a question for our first keynote speaker.
Well, if you have listened to all of the keynote presentations and panel discussions, I think from a corporate perspective, everything is good if it's done, but it seems that there's a lot of risks at hand and there are many uncertainties. That is our reality. And so We talked about what we are doing and what we need to do. But my question to Vice President Ong, we hope you will keep your answers concise. But so in the end, when companies do this, what are the tangible benefits that they can enjoy? Because companies, they exist to make profits. And so from that aspect, what are some of the tangible benefits that they can enjoy despite the risks and uncertainties that there may be related to these actions?
So thank you so much for that question. I think it's a fantastic question, and I think it also touches on the point that Stephen from the New York Times made, which is how do we, in addition to talking about what we stop, think about what we start? I think the sustainability space has changed a great deal since even 5 years ago. Goals like RE100, CFE 24/7 have become part of the corporate vernacular, the corporate vocabulary, and also they have become part of what consumers want. So actually, to your question, the risks of taking a sustainable practice have dropped significantly, in my point of view, from a corporate's perspective. First, sustainability actually saves money. And I think this was also a point that Ms. Singhvi made in her keynote speech. When we think about efficiency from a data center perspective, that's also allowing us to be able to serve more customers with the same infrastructure. It's allowing us to be able to save on efforts and resources to be able to construct more data centers. When we think about sustainability from our consumer product standpoint, it's also making these products even more attractive to a new generation that has grown up with the expectation of being able to make sustainable choices around climate change. And when we think about sustainability as a practice even internally within Google, this really is cost saving in a different name. When we think about it at incorporating sustainable practices at every level, you're also asking your staff, and I was so impressed with the panelists from SK and how SK EcoPlant employees are called EPIs. But that is just one more example of ensuring that at every step of the journey, you have staff, consumers, a public that is thinking very hard about how they save resources. And in the end, that saves them money, that saves us money, and that increases profitability in addition to doing good for the world. So the best part for me about sustainability is it's not a zero-sum game. Everything that you do around sustainability expands the pie and grows opportunity for everyone that touches it.
네, 감사합니다. 제가 그 질문을 드렸던
Thank you very much. The reason I asked you this question is because ESG management is needed for the sustainability of the company. But if the ESG management itself is not sustainable, then it could not profit the long-term growth of the company. That's why I asked this question. So we really don't have a lot of time left. But if there are any members of the panel who have questions to the keynote speakers or other members of your panel, we will open the floor for questions.
네.
Yes, Mr. Kim. Actually, I have a question for our keynote speaker from WBCSD. Well, it's a question related to 24/7 CFE, the carbon-free electricity. 24/7 carbon-free electricity. Well, during your presentation, you mentioned how Google, Microsoft, well, if you look at the sample project's resources, you can see that they're similar compared to the RE100 source. So why is source diversification not taking place? That's my first question. And number two, in Korea, if we were to have the government establish a standard, have businesses follow the 24/7 CFE, what kind of advice would you give to Korea?
Thanks a lot for your question. I think the source diversification is happening even in the examples that I mentioned. I'm not sure if you noticed that there was an element of demand reduction and demand shift that came in. There was also hydropower, low impact hydropower that came in. So there is demand, there is source diversification that is happening around the world. Of course, it depends on which location. So the examples that you saw were mainly from the US and one from the Europe. So it depends on what resources those countries within those regions have. So that was on the source diversification. Your second question is what Korea can do, how standards can be set, and what Korea can do to ensure CFE. So I think one important factor that Asia faces is that it is still, and South Korea faces, is that it is still relatively at a nascent stage in growing up its carbon-free portfolio. And the aspects that I mentioned in my talk, which went beyond the E of ESG, which touched upon society, which touched upon nature, which touched upon life cycle assessment, all of those, the Western world is embedding those now in their decisions. But Asia has this advantage of starting with those elements to focus on. So I think one thing that Asia can do, and the APAC region can do, is to ensure that those criteria are embedded in their procurement decisions from the very beginning, because that's a great advantage that they have. And the other thing is, as I also mentioned in my talk, is that standards need to happen. There can be global standards, but it also needs to be tailored to the countries. So no one else outside of South Korea can comment on what is best. Your government can, because they know the country, they know the resources. So I think it has to be, the global standards have to be in line with the country standards, but tailored for that country. So that would be my comment on that.
네, 저한테
Yes, thank you very much. So the organizers have told me to close exactly on time. So we have about 1 minute and 50 seconds. We can receive one last short question. If not, then I think it would be great to receive a question from the floor, but time does not allow. So perhaps you can ask questions to the panelists or the keynote speakers individually later on. So as it was mentioned,
가장
Global standardization is what we are very interested in. As people have mentioned, RE100 and CBAM are just some of the standards that are in place. But for them to become global standards, we need much discussion. Some people say that regulations related to ESG and guidelines, they are led by certain companies and certain countries. And so from the perspective of other countries and other companies, it may feel like there is no way to climb the social ladder and become bigger companies because of these restrictions. I do hope that through this forum, we will be able to learn about the ESG trends around the world. And from Korean companies' perspective, I do hope that it's an opportunity for us to take a look at the risks within the private sector and public sector related to ESG. And I do hope that the private sector and the public sector can gather our wisdom to discuss ESG management for Korean companies. There are many government organizations in Korea, and I hope that they will be able to prioritize ESG management in their discussions so that there can be a long-term commitment on the side of the government. And so from this perspective, I hope that our session has contributed to your future. I would like to take this opportunity to all of the speakers and discussants, and thank you to the audience as well. ESG management will boost the sustainability of the companies, and I hope that today will be a turning point. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much for the excellent discussion. Thank you to the members of the panel and also our moderator. Another big round of applause, please. Thank you. This brings us to the end of ESG Management Session under the topic of strengthening corporate competitiveness through ESG management. I do hope that it was an informative session for all of you here today. This brings us to the end of the Business Summit of the 2022-3 World Climate Industry Expo. I would like to thank you once again for your participation despite your busy schedules. Thank you for joining the Business Summit across 2 days. This brings us to the end of the Business Summit. I was Cho Ju-yan. Thank you very much.
네, 그리고 잠시 안내 말씀드리겠습니다.
Also, ladies and gentlemen, the official luncheon is to take place. So if you have been invited to the official luncheon, please go to room 203 or 204. So if you have been invited to the official luncheon, please head towards 203 and 204. Thank you very much.
Who have been invited to the official luncheon, please move over to room 203 and 204. For those who have been invited to the official luncheon, please move to room 203 and 204. Thank you very much. 네. And one last word for our speakers. Please move to the stage area for our group photo. 네, 마지막으로 저희 연사분들 사진 촬영 부탁드리겠습니다. 네, 저희 좌장님과 연사분들 사진 촬영만 부탁드리겠습니다. 무대 위로 모시겠습니다.